On this particular video, I want to get to know you. I want to know more about you. So I want you to help me out here, and I want comments down below for this one, please. And it's to do with freedom, the freedom to listen to the music you want to listen to. That's what this is all about. Do you feel that you are able to listen to any music you wish without criticism, without the threat of violence, without somebody having a go at you somewhere, somehow, whether that's parents, so-called friends, colleagues, people at work, people around you, strangers you might not know, people who approach you from out of the blue, because of the music you listen to. Now, there may be related elements to that. Because of the music you listen to, you then dress and your image is of a certain related fashion. So, punk rock music, punk rock clothes, Mohican, whatever, you know, the sort of thing. Early Cure, black top, black trousers, black shoes, black eyeshadow, black hair, the whole goth thing. Do you know what I mean? We're talking music, but also related fashion, I suppose. Doesn't always have to be that way, though. It could just be knowing somebody likes a certain band or artist, and there are issues with that. It's always been so. I mean, going way back, the early jazz, pre-World War II, you could say that the parents were the monsters, as it were, to rebel against. The parents themselves may have seen jazz in a sexualized way, the way their children were dancing to this stuff. There may have been a racial connection to that, which the generations of those days did not approve of. As I say, I mentioned earlier on, the clothing associated with those scenes that continued into the swing jazz and jive, again, sexualized dancing, disapproval from older generations. That went on further to rock and roll after the war, where you had the invention of the teenager and you had the invention of the juvenile delinquent. All of those connections, the breakup of society, breakup of the family, which went over into the 60s, and so on. It's been traditional to rebel against your parents. Don't you feel that always comes up? You know, but the mere fact that it's traditional to rebel against your parents is in itself an oxymoron, surely, because anything that's a tradition is no longer a rebellion. Once it becomes a tradition, it's not a rebellion. It's part of the sort of ruling society that we live in. It's been absorbed, and it's no longer outside. So I don't think the whole rebelling against the parent bit is relevant anymore. And I wonder, talking about the freedom to listen to the music you want, I wonder why the parents are even part of that anymore. Do you have, and this is the question I'm asking you, do you have that issue with your parents? I find parents are far more enlightened, probably since rock and roll, have become more enlightened, may grumble a bit, you know, what's that rubbish you're listening to, just turn down that noise, that sort of thing. But not overly violently against, not, you know, get out of my house and never come back type kind of thing, or 2-hour lectures on the fact. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you tell me. I wonder, since the 60s, the problem has not been the traditional evil, i.e. parents, but it's been firstly the media, and then later on, and in amongst all that, our friends and colleagues and, you know, the people around us, that we're rebelling against each other and that we're struggling against each other. A couple of examples. The mod versus rockers thing in the 60s. I've read books, and again, you tell me your experiences if you've been there. Maybe you might disagree. But I've read books of mods in particular who said early on their relationship with rockers was fine. It was, wasn't too pally, but it was fine, non-aggressive. They tolerated each other. Everybody had their space sorted. But the whole adversarial thing, you know, the Barneys in Brighton and the fights in Margate, was encouraged and almost generated by the tabloid newspapers, fueled by them. The anticipation of violence was headline news. Never mind the reporting of violence. Any reporting of violence was magnified. The notion of the hippie, again, associating hippie with the hippie culture with free love and drugs and the breakdown of society. I remember reading Michael Lang, was it? The guy who organised Woodstock. Michael Lang recounted in his early days, he was chased from a roadside diner with a friend of his, a male friend of his, chased by 6 guys with guns, and they ran to their car and sped off. And their crime? Long hair. That was it. They had long hair. That's no more than that. They almost died. Later on, in the punk era, reading books by people who were there in 76, early 77, before the Bill Grundy interview of Nationwide on BBC with the Sex Pistols, that punks were stared at. Yes, there may have been comments directed towards them, fine. But that was it, generally speaking. There may have been exceptions, but there was a toleration there, you know. Who's that weirdo? You know, maybe the odd comment in the streets as you walk past. Yes, but punks had a purity of vision, they had a purity of philosophy, they had a purity of fashion, they had a purity of music, you could say, up until the Bill Grundy thing. And then it became a free-for-all. Everyone joined in, it became a mass consumer fashion. But the tabloid, and that was one element, which is not necessarily negative, although some punks disliked the commercialization of their belief, if I can use that word. But when the tabloids dived in, it became a moral panic. I did some research myself. In 1977, just on the Sex Pistols alone, the Daily Mail wrote 53 features, articles, shall we say. 53. In 1977. That's more than one a week. All year. The tone of all of them was moral panic. It was the filth and the fury, wasn't it, from the Sun? And it was all to do with that sort of degradation, associating the word hatred, violence, vile, everything negative. It was a thesaurus of negativity aimed towards punks. And it was a tabloid. I remember seeing, was it the Daily Mirror, of all people? Could have been the Sun as well, who advocated violence towards punks, the eradication of punks. Now, you know, that's red rag to a bull, isn't it? Don't you think? So I believe a lot of the violence directed towards punk after the Bill Grundy event was tabloid generated. Now, from that point, yes, parents became worried, or councils became worried and started banning gigs. Authorities were on red alert. The police all of a sudden were a bit over-enthusiastic, shall we say, and all that happened. But I would say the media was the trigger. Again, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm way off base and why. And in your opinion, what's the reality then? You know, this is my opinion, okay, from my observations. I'm not saying I'm completely correct, but this is my view. So you tell me what you think, what in your opinion, what the reality is. As for me, personally, my take on it, I've always seen my parents as being completely tolerant about my music. Whatever it was. They never said a word. I found the issues with my school friends. Now, in secondary school, and for my American friends out there, that means ages 11 to 16, as was. I think it's 11 to 18 now. But secondary school was 11 to... So what's that, high school in the US? I'm not sure. Anyway, so Early on, it would have been bands like Queen when I was age 11. 12, 13, it would have been lots of prog rock, Genesis, Yes, people like that. During 14-ish, that would have been around my punk years, as it were. Interested in bands like, Stranglers, Blondie, people like that. But but less so. Although I loved all of that. I still like it now. Pistols and all that, the Damned especially. Great, love all of that. But I was more interested in instrumental synth music. So Kraftwerk, John Fox era, Ultravox and Midjaw early on. Anything synthy, electro at that time, loved it. Early Jean-Michel Jarre, that type of thing. Now, what got my goat, what made me irritated was that there were certain artists who you could not hear, you could not listen to, you could not admit to following or enjoying. Because if you did, you were forced to be embarrassed by liking certain artists. It was an embarrassment. You couldn't bring it up in conversation. Because if you did, you risked social exclusion on one scale, 2, being beaten up and hung from the nearest lamppost by your toes, and anywhere in between. It was not a good thing. It was a social censorship. It was censorship by your peers. A terrible thing. This was worse than parents, because you're rebelling now against people of your own age, your own group, dress like you, talk like you. You're rebelling against them. So my error was always to have an eclectic interest in music. So, for example, I loved Frank Zappa, but I also loved Frank Sinatra. I loved post-punk minimal synth, but I also loved Leo Sayer. I had a great interest in acoustic guitar players, cultish country like Johnny Cash, avant-garde electronica, but I liked the Bee Gees, But you couldn't admit that in school. If I'd have walked in and said I loved the Bee Gees at school, or I was a fan of Leo Sayer at school, I wouldn't have got out alive. No, who am I rebelling against then if I like Leo Sayer? Poor old Leo Sayer. Barbra Streisand. Now, these are people that were infused into my head at home. My parents did that to me. My dad made me a Bee Gees fan because it was always on rotation at home. Same with my mum. Always playing Barbra Streisand. You've got no choice. You're brainwashed by Barbra Streisand. You walk out a fan. You've got, do you know what I mean? You might hate it to begin with, but after a while you think, Babs, she's got something. And after a while, as you get older, you start thinking, yeah, Bee Gees, great stuff. Harmonies, I love the harmonies, and that's why I love the Bee Gees. Technically, superb in terms of harmonies, and I'm a sucker for harmonies. That's why I like Crosby, Stills and Nash, for example. So I did my own personal rebellion. I went to see Ultravox at the Liverpool Empire, but at the same location, I saw Leo Sayer live, and a cracking show it was. Thank you very much. I'd be spending serious money on Kraftwerk bootlegs, Whisper, but I would also be finding bootlegs for Bee Gees. I hate the fact that you're almost told what to listen to. And if you dare go against the grain, you set yourself up for criticism, often by your friends, your so-called friends. So that's where I found my problem. My peers, that's who I rebelled against. Not my parents, not any authority figure, actually, but my peers. So they were my bugbears. They were the issues I had in my early life. Since then, I've had no issues at all, and I'm free to listen to who I want to, when I want to, and never had any problems with anyone criticizing in any way, shape or form. But in those early, nervous, uncertain, hormone-ridden early years of your life, it can be a problem. Because you're not too confident about things, are you, when you're a kid? So tell me, who are your Who did you rebel against? And why? And what happened? Give me some stories. I'd love to know. Give me some information, some background. So whether it was authority figures, parents, friends, family, work, people, what sort of music are you talking about when you had these issues, if you did? If you've had no issues at all, tell me. I'd love to know. But let's talk about this, because it's a subject that's very rarely discussed. It's always parents. Oh yeah, rebel against. That's not. I think that's only a small fraction. There's more to it, and the media gets away with it. And one final thing: it's not just the Daily Mail and tabloids. Sometimes it's the music press. I read a lot about the second wave of mod music in sort of 81, where you had like people like the Chords, Secret Affair, the Jam, late on. And you had the mods, Quadrophenia, all that type of thing. Their biggest people who criticised them was the NME, music press. The NME couldn't stand them, and that was their enemy, in mod terms. How crazy is that? Anyway, so you tell me, who were your music enemies? Who did you rebel against, and why, and what happened? Until then. And let's talk about this. But until the next video, bye.